My husband said, "You're not my wife anymore." So I locked him out of the lake house he never knew was mine. What would you do if your husband rejected you inside a home he believed belonged to him? Let us see how it unfolded. The anniversary cake was still sweating beneath its glass dome when Grant walked into the lake house with another woman's hand resting on his arm. At 6:03 on a Friday evening, the last gold light of October stretched across Lake Geneva and turned the windows of blue heron amber. Nia Bennett Mercer stood at the long oak table in a deep green dress, one palm flattened beside the knife she had laid out for two. The room smelled of cedar smoke, buttercream, and the rosemary chicken cooling untouched in the kitchen. For 9 years, Grant had arrived here with a weekend bag and the easy confidence of a man entering a place that welcomed him. This time, he brought Lauren Vale, 3 Mercer Resorts investors, and the expression he used when he expected a room to rearrange itself around him. Lauren wore a cream wool coat over a fitted navy dress. A small overnight case rolled behind her, guided by one manicured hand. In the other, she held a brass key engraved with a blue heron. Nia's gaze stopped there before it reached Lauren's face. The key had hung for years inside the locked drawer of the upstairs study, one of 2 old mechanical backups kept after the house's electronic system was installed. Grant had no reason to carry it. Lauren had even less. "You're early," Nia said. Her voice came out level, though the pulse beneath her jaw beat hard enough to feel. Grant glanced at the table, then at the cake piped with the date of their wedding. "I told you I had people coming. You said you had dinner in town." Plans changed. Behind him, the investors paused beneath the carved staircase, uncertain whether to remove their coats. Lauren did not hesitate. She crossed the room, set her case near the hallway leading to the master suite, and looked over the furniture as though evaluating a property before closing. "The house photographs beautifully," she said. "The lake collection is going to sell itself." Nia turned to Grant. "What lake collection?" He removed his gloves one finger at a time. "Mercer Lake Collection. We're presenting the concept tonight. Here. This is the obvious flagship." The words settled into the room with more weight than the luggage by the stairs. Nia looked at the strangers standing beside the fireplace, then back at her husband. "We need to speak privately." Grant's mouth tightened, not with shame, but inconvenience. "There is nothing private left to discuss." "Grant." "No." He stepped closer, lowering his voice only enough to make everyone lean into the silence. "You're not my wife anymore. Stop acting like this is your home." One of the investors looked down at his phone. Another studied the lake through the windows. Lauren's lips parted in a sympathetic curve that never reached her eyes. Nia's hand moved from the cake knife to the back of a dining chair. The wood was cool beneath her fingers. She drew one measured breath, then another. "And what exactly do you believe this place is?" she asked. Grant gave a short laugh. "A family property your relatives barely use, and a business opportunity you're too emotional to understand." Lauren slipped the brass key into her coat pocket. "You should probably take what you need tonight," she said. "Once the brand team starts staging, it will be easier if there are no personal complications." Nia looked toward the upstairs landing, where their wedding photograph still stood on the console table. Below it, Lauren's suitcase waited like a claim already filed. Grant turned to his guests. "Drinks are on the terrace. We'll begin in 20 minutes. He moved past Nia without touching her. The investors followed, relieved to be given somewhere else to look. Lauren lingered. "Grant said you'd make this difficult," she murmured. "He also said the trust belongs to the Bennett family, not to you." Nia's eyes dropped once more to the pocket holding the heron key. Then she reached into the sideboard drawer and removed a slim blue leather property folder, worn soft at the corners from years of use. Lauren noticed it, but dismissed it almost immediately. "Paperwork won't change what he decided," she said. Nia closed the drawer with care. "No," she replied, "but it may change what he thinks he decided with." As laughter drifted in from the terrace, Nia opened the folder just enough to see the first page and the name printed beneath the blue heron seal. Lauren had entered the house holding a borrowed key. She had not yet realized the woman she came to replace was the only person who could decide whether that key opened anything at all. Lauren unpacked in Nia's bedroom before the anniversary candles had burned halfway down. From the terrace, men's voices drifted through the open French doors, softened by the wind moving across Lake Geneva. Inside, the house had changed temperature. The cedar fire still burned, but the warmth no longer belonged to the evening Nia had prepared. She stood near the dining table in the same deep green dress, the blue leather property folder resting beneath one hand, while upstairs a suitcase wheel knocked against the hallway runner. Grant came in carrying 2 whiskey glasses. He placed one beside the investor who had returned for his phone, then looked at Nia as though she were the guest who had overstayed. "You should change," he said. "We're photographing the rooms after dinner." No one asked permission to photograph anything. This is preliminary branding. For a property you do not manage. The investor froze with his hand around the phone. Grant noticed and smiled toward him. Family disagreement. Nothing operational. Nia watched the phrase do its work. The man nodded and left, grateful for an explanation that asked nothing of him. Grant lowered his voice. "Do not embarrass me in front of people funding the next phase of my company. You brought your mistress into our anniversary dinner and called my home your flagship. Our marriage has been over for months. Only one of us was informed." He glanced toward the stairs. "Lauren understands what this project requires. You never wanted blue heron used properly." Nia's eyes moved to the concept boards now spread across the far end of the table. The photographs showed the boathouse, the stone terrace, the carved staircase, even the upstairs reading alcove where her grandmother used to sit. A silver title ran across the first board, Mercer Lake Collection, Blue Heron, the original destination. No ownership credit appeared beneath it. No approval line. No mention of Bennett Atelier, though Nia had restored every room depicted. "You made these from my architectural photographs," she said. Grant followed her gaze. They were in the shared archive. For restoration records. Images are images. Not when they identify private property for commercial use. His expression hardened. This is exactly why the family trust should have professional management. You treat every decision like a personal wound. Lauren descended the staircase before Nia could answer. Her cream coat was gone. She now wore the navy dress beneath it and carried Nia's ivory cashmere wrap across her shoulders. The sight of it struck more sharply than the suitcase. Grant had given Nia that wrap during their first winter at Blue Heron. Lauren ran her fingers over the fringe. "I hope you don't mind." The bedroom was cold. Nia looked at Grant. He took a sip of whiskey. "It's just clothing." Lauren crossed to the concept boards and moved the cake platter aside to make room for a stack of brochures. Buttercream dragged across the polished oak. "The master suite will need a cleaner visual identity," she said. "Too many personal photographs. We can replace them with archival lake images before the launch." "You went through the bedroom?" Nia asked. "Grant told me to settle in." "He cannot authorize that." Lauren gave her a small, pitying smile. "He said the house is held by your family trust and that you have no individual ownership. You're a beneficiary, Nia. That isn't the same as being in charge." Grant said nothing, which told Nia the line had come from him. For years, he had reduced the structure to whatever version made him sound closest to power. A trust somewhere above them. Relatives no one saw. Nia as the sentimental granddaughter allowed to choose curtains. "And you believe Grant is in charge?" Nia asked. Lauren touched the brass heron key now hanging from a slim chain at her waist. "He has access. He brings the investors. He built the brand. That's what control looks like in the real world." Outside, someone called for Grant. He turned toward the terrace, then paused beside Nia. "Take the Chicago car tonight. We'll discuss your belongings through counsel." "My belongings. Do not make me say it twice." He left with Lauren following close behind, still wearing Nia's wrap. Nia remained beside the table until their reflections disappeared into the dark glass. Then she picked up one of the brochures Lauren had placed over the anniversary cake. On the back, beneath the launch date, was a line authorizing guests to book private tours of Blue Heron through Mercer Resorts. The contact name was Lauren Vale, President, Mercer Lake Collection. Nia read it once, folded the brochure, and slipped it into the blue leather folder. Grant had not merely invited another woman into the house. He had allowed her to sell access to a property neither of them owned. Grant's lawyer sent the waiver while Nia was still standing beside the ruined anniversary cake. Her phone vibrated against the oak table at 7:42 p.m., just as laughter rose from the terrace and Lauren began describing Blue Heron's master suite to the investors as if she had already chosen the linens. The email subject read temporary separation and property cooperation. Nia opened it without sitting down. Grant's attorney had attached a notice stating that Grant considered the marriage functionally over and intended to begin formal divorce discussions in Chicago the following week. Beneath it was a separate document titled Limited Consent for Commercial Use. The language was polished, narrow, and designed to sound harmless. Nia would acknowledge that Mercer Resorts had permission to photograph, advertise, tour, stage, and promote Blue Heron Lake House for the Mercer Lake Collection. She would also agree not to interfere with investor visits, brand presentations, or future negotiations involving the property while the parties discussed separation. The document did not transfer title. It did not need to. If she signed, Grant could show investors written consent from the only Bennett family member they had ever seen associated with the house. Her signature would turn his assumption into evidence. "Did you get it?" Grant asked. From behind her, he had come in through the French doors with his tie loosened and his phone in one hand. "Your lawyer works quickly. This does not need to become ugly." Nia looked at the screen. "You announced the end of our marriage in front of strangers and sent me a waiver 40 minutes later." The paperwork was already being prepared. The admission landed without ceremony. He had not arrived to end the marriage. He had arrived expecting her to cooperate with the version he had already built. "Sign tonight," he said. "The investors only need confirmation that the family will not block the launch." The family. The Bennett Trust. He spoke the name with the confidence of someone referring to an institution too distant to answer back. "Your relatives have never opposed my use of the house. You should not turn a business matter into revenge because Lauren and I are together." Nia's thumb rested near the signature field. "You told them Mercer Resorts controls Blue Heron. I told them we have long-term access. You offered private tours. That is standard pre-launch marketing." Through Lauren. Grant glanced toward the terrace, where Lauren stood beneath the outdoor heaters wearing Nia's ivory wrap. "She runs the division. A division that does not exist." His patience thinned. "You are an architect, Nia. I understand that you feel protective of the restoration, but this is larger than design. Mercer Resorts can turn this property into an asset instead of a family museum. It is already an asset, not one you control personally." He moved closer and lowered his voice. "The house belongs to an LLC inside the trust. You are not on the deed. Stop pretending a family connection makes you the owner." Nia studied him. He knew enough vocabulary to sound informed and not enough structure to understand the danger of what he was saying. Blue Heron Lake LLC was indeed listed on the deed. That single fact had become the foundation of his entire fantasy. "What happens if I refuse?" she asked. Grant's expression settled into something colder. "Then I tell the investors you are obstructing a legitimate company initiative during a marital dispute. I also instruct the staff not to admit you during scheduled events until counsel sorts this out." He lifted his phone. A message from Mercer Resorts Security was visible on the screen. Nia's name had been removed from the weekend event guest list. Grant believed a corporate list could exclude her from the house itself. "You removed my access?" she asked. "Only from company functions. Inside Blue Heron. Until you behave reasonably." The terrace doors opened, and Lauren stepped inside. "They're ready for the property walkthrough," she said. Then she saw the waiver on Nia's phone. "It's simple. Sign, take the Chicago car, and let everyone move forward." Nia looked from Lauren's borrowed wrap to the brochure inside her blue leather folder. Then she pressed the download icon and saved both documents, the separation notice and the unsigned waiver, into the property file. "I will not sign a statement giving Mercer Resorts rights it has never been granted," she said. Grant's voice hardened. "Then you are choosing a fight." "No, I am preserving the record." She closed the document without touching the signature field. While Grant turned back toward the terrace, Nia opened a secure message to Miriam Brooks and attached the waiver, the brochure, and a photograph of the brass heron key hanging from Lauren's waist. Her request contained only one sentence. "Please confirm who has authority to grant or revoke access to Blue Heron Lake LLC." Miriam's reply arrived before Grant finished leading the investors through the upstairs hall. Nia's phone lit beneath the blue leather folder at 8:06 p.m., the screen reflecting against the dark window over Lake Geneva. She did not open the message in front of Lauren or the guests. Instead, she carried the anniversary cake into the kitchen, set it beside the untouched chicken, and closed the swinging door behind her. The room smelled of rosemary, cold buttercream, and the faint mineral scent of rain beginning over the lake. Only then did she read Miriam Brooks's response. Do not sign. Call me from a private room. Nia went into the pantry, where shelves of preserves and old copper pans softened the noise from the rest of the house. Miriam answered. Immediately. I reviewed the waiver, the brochure, and the photograph of the key, she said. First, are you safe? Yes. Grant brought investors. Lauren has moved into the master suite. Has anyone threatened you physically? No. Good. Then we proceed carefully. Miriam's tone was calm, but each word landed with the weight of something already established. She explained that Blue Heron was not the couple's primary marital residence. Grant had no name on the deed, no membership interest in Blue Heron Lake LLC, and no tenancy agreement. His access existed only because the property had been made available to him as a family guest and, on limited occasions, for approved Mercer Resorts events. Do not remove his belongings tonight, Miriam said. Do not confront the investors. Do not change anything while he is still inside. What can I do? You can revoke future guest access after he leaves, provided we send written notice and arrange supervised retrieval of personal items. The electronic codes can be disabled through the property account. The old brass key is different. It is only a backup for the original mechanical lock, and that cylinder can be changed once the house is vacant. Nia leaned against the pantry shelf. Beyond the wall, Grant's voice carried through the dining room as he described projected nightly rates for rooms he did not control. He removed me from the event guest list, she said. Miriam gave a brief pause. A corporate guest list does not determine who controls the property. Save the message. Do not argue about it tonight. He says the trust belongs to my relatives. Grant has been told otherwise. He does not believe I have authority. Belief is not the operative issue. Miriam asked Nia to open the blue folder and locate the property use acknowledgement signed 6 years earlier. Nia found it beneath the restoration photographs and the LLC records, Grant's signature angled across the final page. The language was plain. Access was personal, non-transferable, and subject to revocation if the property was marketed, assigned, or used commercially without written approval. The brochure and Lauren's title are enough to trigger review. Miriam said. The private tours make it stronger. The waiver proves they knew approval was missing. Nia looked toward the pantry door. And tonight? Let them leave on their own schedule. Once the house is empty, call me again. I will send formal notice to Grant's attorney and the property manager. You will authorize the code revocation in writing. No spectacle. No surprise removal while anyone is still inside. Nia closed her eyes for one breath. He expects me to take the car back to Chicago. Are you planning to? No, Miriam's voice softened. Then remain on the property. It is not Grant's decision to dismiss you from it. Nia returned to the dining room with the folder tucked beneath her arm. Grant stood near the fireplace, pointing to a rendering of Blue Heron beneath the Mercer Resorts logo. Lauren had set Nia's wedding photograph face down on the console table. We're leaving for dinner in 10 minutes, Grant said. The driver will take you to Chicago after us. Nia righted the photograph, but did not answer. Did you hear me? I heard you. He mistook the absence of resistance for surrender and turned back to the investors. At 8:18 p.m., Miriam sent the written authority confirmation. Blue Heron Lake LLC held title to the property. Bennett Family Property Trust owned the LLC, and the person authorized to approve or revoke access was Nia Bennett Mercer, sole acting trustee. The lock rejected Grant's code in front of the same investors he had told the house belonged to him. At 10:11 p.m., the black SUV rolled back beneath the porte cochere, its headlights sweeping across the wet stone and the Blue Heron carved above the front doors. Rain had deepened over Lake Geneva, blurring the dock lights into pale streaks. Inside, Nia stood in the entry hall wearing the same deep green dress, the blue leather folder closed on the console beside her. She had waited until Grant, Lauren, and the investors left for dinner. Then, exactly as Miriam instructed, she signed the written revocation, authorized the property manager to disable Grant's guest code, and approved replacement of the old mechanical cylinder. Formal notice went to Grant's attorney at 8:47 p.m., along with a supervised retrieval window for the following afternoon. Nothing had been smashed, hidden, or thrown onto the driveway. His personal belongings remained where he left them. Only the permission had changed. Outside, Grant entered his code a second time. The keypad flashed red. Lauren shifted beneath Nia's ivory wrap, while one investor held an umbrella over the group. "Try the key," she said. Grant took the brass heron key from the chain at her waist and forced it into the new lock. It turned halfway, then stopped. "What did you do?" His voice came through the closed door, sharp enough to carry into the hall. Nia opened the inner panel but left the deadbolt secured. "Your access was revoked in writing." Grant stared at her through the glass. "Open the door." "Your attorney received the notice." "This is my company's event property." "No. It was a property you were allowed to use for approved events." Lauren stepped closer, rain collecting along her blonde hair. "My luggage is upstairs. You may collect it tomorrow during the scheduled access period." "You cannot keep my belongings." "I'm not keeping them. I'm requiring supervised retrieval." One of the investors turned toward Grant. "You said Mercer Resorts had long-term control of Blue Heron." Grant ignored him and lifted his phone. "I'm calling the property manager." "He has the same notice," Nia said. The call connected, but Grant's expression changed as he listened. The manager did not restore the code. He confirmed that only the acting trustee could authorize access and that the authorization had been withdrawn. Lauren pulled the wrap tighter around her shoulders. "Tell him who you are." Grant's voice dropped. "He knows who I am." "Apparently not in the way you described." The second investor lowered his umbrella and looked toward the illuminated windows. "Is Blue Heron actually owned by Mercer Resorts?" Grant turned from the door. "It is part of a family arrangement. Nia is reacting emotionally because of our separation." Nia said nothing. She did not need to argue through glass while the property system, written notice, and manager's confirmation answered for her. Grant tried the code once. More. The red light appeared again, colder than before. Then his phone began vibrating with messages. One came from Mercer Resorts Counsel, acknowledging receipt of Nia's refusal to sign the commercial use waiver. Another came from the investor who had attended dinner, asking for proof of title and management authority before any further commitment. Lauren looked over Grant's shoulder as he opened the message. "They want the ownership records tonight," she whispered. "This is temporary," he said, but the sentence no longer sounded like a promise. The investors exchanged a glance and walked back toward the SUV. Grant struck the door once with the flat of his palm. "You're destroying a legitimate expansion because you're angry." Nia met his eyes through the rain-streaked glass. "I'm preventing you from selling access you were never authorized to offer." He stepped back, breathing hard, while Lauren finally removed the ivory wrap and draped it over the stone railing as if returning it could restore some dignity. Nia waited until the SUV disappeared down the drive, then opened the door and brought the wrap inside. On the floor near the threshold lay a glossy folder one investor had dropped. It contained the same Mercer Lake Collection brochure she had saved earlier, but the attached financing summary went further. Grant had presented Blue Heron as the secured flagship asset, supporting the entire first phase of the resort expansion. He had not merely used her house to impress investors. He had built the valuation of his new division around a property his company did not own, could not manage, and had just been locked out of. 6 years earlier, Nia had opened Blue Heron to save Grant's company, and he had slowly rewritten the favor as proof that the house had always been part of his success. The memory returned while she stood alone in the entry hall, the ivory wrap folded over one arm and the financing summary open on the console. Back then, Blue Heron had looked nothing like the polished flagship in Grant's brochures. A winter freeze had split pipes behind the east wall, warped the oak floors, and stained the plaster beneath the upstairs windows. For 3 months, Nia drove from Chicago before sunrise every Friday, changed into work boots in the mudroom, and spent the weekends measuring damaged trim, arguing with contractors, and tracing the original moldings by hand so they could be reproduced instead of replaced. Grant came one Saturday afternoon wearing a camel coat and carrying coffee. He found her kneeling beside a stack of salvaged floorboards, pencil tucked behind one ear, sawdust across the knees of her jeans. "You're rebuilding a museum," he said, smiling. "I'm preserving what still has a future," she replied. At the time, Mercer Resorts was little more than a struggling hotel company with 1 renovated property, 2 delayed projects, and investors beginning to doubt Grant's expansion plans. He had charm, a strong pitch, and no place that made his vision feel real. One evening, after the workers left, He stood with Nia on the unfinished terrace and looked across the frozen lake. If people could see what a Mercer property is supposed to feel like, they'd understand, he said. Nia heard the fear beneath the confidence. She loved him enough to answer the fear instead of the words. She allowed him to host a private investor retreat at Blue Heron after the restoration was complete. She designed the weekend schedule, arranged the rooms, chose local vendors, and created presentation spaces that moved guests through the house from sunrise breakfast in the glass room to dinner beneath the restored beams. She even removed Bennett Atelier's name from the welcome materials because Grant said investors needed to see one clear brand. The retreat worked. By Sunday afternoon, he had secured the first major backing for Mercer Resort's expansion. In the photographs, Grant stood at the center of every room. Nia appeared once, blurred near a doorway, checking the placement of candles. At first, he thanked her privately. He told her the house had given his company a second chance. Later, he told colleagues that Blue Heron had been the inspiration behind the Mercer approach. Then the story changed again. He began calling it the company's original retreat property. He brought executives there without asking first, ordered branded linens, and spoke about future events as if approval were a formality. Nia corrected him quietly each time. She did not want to turn their marriage into a negotiation or make his investors question a company still finding its footing. She believed discretion protected both the house and the man she had helped build. Grant treated every unpublicized correction as permission to keep telling the louder version. The line was finally drawn in Miriam Brooks's office before the second Mercer retreat. Grant sat at a walnut conference table while Miriam reviewed the property use acknowledgement. The document stated that his access was personal, temporary, non-transferable, and did not create ownership, management authority, or commercial rights. Any use of Blue Heron for branding, tours, investors, or third-party guests required written approval from the acting trustee. Grant skimmed the restrictions, paused only at the event dates, and signed the final page. Nia watched him place the pen down. "You understand this is permission, not control," she said. Grant reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "I understand it's your family's house," he replied. "I would never confuse your trust with my company." That night, the promise had sounded effortless. Now, in the quiet entry hall, Nia unfolded the same acknowledgement from the blue leather folder. Grant's signature remained beneath the sentence that would decide everything. Unauthorized commercial use or transfer of access shall result in immediate revocation of all property privileges. Blue Heron had never belonged to an invisible group of Bennett relatives. Its ownership had been structured so clearly that Grant's mistake required years of choosing not to see it. The legal history began long before their marriage, when Nia's grandmother transferred the lake house into Blue Heron Lake LLC to separate the property from personal liabilities and preserve it as a single managed asset. The recorded deed named the LLC as title holder. Bennett Family Property Trust owned 100% of that LLC's membership interest, which meant the trust, not Grant, not Mercer Resorts, and not even Nia in her individual capacity, held the ownership chain. After her grandmother died, Nia became the sole acting trustee. That role gave her authority to manage the LLC, approve events, protect the property, and decide who could enter or use it, subject to the trust's purpose and Wisconsin law. The structure had never been designed to deceive anyone. It had been designed to keep Blue Heron intact. Nia's grandmother had watched neighboring lake properties fracture through divorces, forced sales, and family disputes. She wanted the house preserved, not divided into leverage. That was why title remained with the LLC and control flowed through the trust. Grant had been shown every layer before the first Mercer retreat. Miriam Brooks had explained it across the walnut conference table while a diagram lay between them. Blue Heron Lake LLC on one line, Bennett Family Property Trust above it, and Nia's name beside the words sole acting trustee. Grant had leaned back in his chair, checked a message, and asked only whether the arrangement prevented him from hosting investors. "It prevents you from treating permission as ownership," Miriam had said. He smiled as if the distinction were too technical to matter. "I'm not trying to buy the place." Then the acknowledgement should be easy to sign. It was. He signed the property use document, initialed the page stating he had no membership interest, and accepted access as a family guest. The permission allowed him to stay at Blue Heron with Nia, attend approved gatherings, and host specific Mercer Resorts events once written consent was granted. It did not allow him to transfer access to Lauren, advertise private tours, use the house as collateral in a business narrative, or present Mercer Resorts as the property's manager. The same document stated that those actions would trigger immediate revocation. Grant had not objected because, at the time, he needed the house more than he needed control over it. Years later, he remembered only the doors that had opened. He forgot the signature beneath the limits. Or perhaps he chose to reinterpret them. He began saying the trust belonged to the Bennett family, as though Nia stood outside that phrase. He treated the LLC on the deed as proof no individual had authority, even though every event approval carried Nia's trustee signature. When staff asked whether a date had been cleared, he answered before she could. When Lauren joined the company, he told her Blue Heron was a legacy property tied to his marriage and therefore available to the brand. A half-truth repeated often enough became the architecture of his confidence. Nia sat at the long oak table the next morning with the blue leather folder open before her. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Miriam joined by video and reviewed the evidence already preserved: the unsigned waiver, the brochure offering private tours, the financing summary calling Blue Heron a secured flagship asset, and the photograph of Lauren carrying the brass key. Then Miriam opened the access history maintained for the property. Grant's guest code had been used to create a secondary credential for Lauren 3 weeks earlier. The authorization field listed Grant Mercer as property principal, a title he had never held. Attached to that entry was a copy of the old acknowledgement bearing his initials beside the restriction on transferring access. He had not merely misunderstood the rules. He had used the document that defined his limits to create the permission that violated them. Miriam looked into the camera. The revocation condition is fully satisfied. Nia rested her fingers on Grant's signature. The house had not changed hands. The authority had never left her. Grant had simply produced the exact record needed to bring every borrowed privilege back under her control. Grant's real plan was not to steal the deed. It was to make Blue Heron commercially inseparable from Mercer Resorts before Nia could object without appearing to destroy his company. By Monday morning, the lake had cleared to a hard blue beneath the autumn sky, and sunlight fell across the dining table where Nia had arranged every item already preserved: Lauren's brochure, the unsigned waiver, the financing summary, the property use acknowledgement, and the access history showing Grant had created a credential under a title he never held. Miriam Brooks joined by secure video while Nia reviewed the Mercer Lake collection materials page by page. The first section described Blue Heron as the flagship property. The second assigned Lauren the title president of Mercer Lake Collection. The third outlined investor commitments tied to the belief that Mercer Resorts had long-term management control over the house. None of it transferred the deed, the LLC membership, or the trust's authority. Grant understood enough to avoid making a direct ownership claim in writing. Instead, he had built a commercial structure around the appearance of control. He knows the LLC owns the property, Nia said. That is why he keeps calling this a management arrangement. Miriam nodded. He is trying to create reliance. If investors commit money, vendors sign contracts, and the launch becomes public, he believes you will approve the arrangement rather than expose the gap. The financing summary confirmed it. Mercer Resorts planned to use Blue Heron's image, architecture, and reputation to raise capital for 3 proposed lakefront developments. The house itself would remain in the trust, but its name and visual identity would become the foundation of the new division. Grant had promised investors that Mercer Resorts would hold exclusive rights to host private retreats, conduct paid tours, reproduce Nia's restoration designs, and market future resorts as part of the Blue Heron standard. Lauren's role depended on those promises. Her title, compensation projections, and public introduction all appeared beneath photographs taken from Nia's private architectural archive. They are not moving the house, Nia said. They are moving everything people associate with it. And representing that your consent is inevitable, Miriam replied. Grant's strategy was simple enough to sound plausible. The deed stayed where it was. The trust remained untouched. But once the market accepted Blue Heron as Mercer Resorts' flagship, he expected Nia to face a brutal choice: approve the use or become the wife blamed for collapsing an expansion, damaging investors, and threatening employees. He knew part of the truth. He knew the house sat inside an LLC. He knew the Bennett Trust controlled that LLC. He knew Nia was connected closely enough that her signature mattered, which was why he had sent the waiver. What he had misjudged was the final link. He still believed Nia was only the family member whose consent would smooth the process, not the sole acting trustee whose refusal made every promise unenforceable. Across the state line in Chicago, Grant and Lauren revised their presentation for the investor event scheduled at Lake Geneva Yacht Club. Lauren removed the phrase ownership control and replaced it with secured long-term management. "That protects us," she said. "It sounds less absolute." Grant read the line, then approved it. "Once we announce the commitments, the trust will negotiate. What if Nia appears? She will not challenge family property documents in public." His confidence rested on the same habit that had protected him for years. Nia corrected him privately, preserved appearances, and absorbed the cost. Lauren opened the final speaker certification and signed beneath the statement confirming that all titles and commercial representations were accurate to the best of her knowledge. Grant signed the accompanying authority statement, declaring that Mercer Resorts possessed the right to market Blue Heron and negotiate its commercial use. Back at the lake house, Miriam recommended sending a cease and desist before the event. Nia looked at the signatures, then at the yacht club invitation already printed with Blue Heron's image. Stopping them privately would let Grant call the entire matter a marital misunderstanding. Allowing them to speak would make the representation theirs alone. "Do not cancel the presentation," Nia said. "Notify the venue that Blue Heron Lake LLC will attend to verify ownership and authority before any investment commitment is accepted." Miriam studied her for a moment. "You want them to finish?" Nia closed the blue leather folder around the evidence they had already created. "I want them to say publicly what they have been willing to sign privately." Grant walked into the Lake Geneva Yacht Club believing the hardest part was already over, because Nia had allowed him to mistake silence for surrender one last time. The investor presentation began at 6:30 on Thursday evening beneath brass chandeliers and tall windows overlooking the darkening water. Blue Heron's image filled the main screen behind the stage, its restored stone terrace glowing above the words Mercer Lake Collection, the original destination. Round tables held leather folders, projected returns, and glossy brochures featuring rooms Nia had designed with her own hands. She sat near the rear in a black tailored suit, the blue property folder resting across her lap. Miriam Brooks occupied the seat beside her. Neither woman spoke when Grant entered to applause with Lauren on his arm. Lauren wore ivory this time, a deliberate echo of the wrap she had left on the railing outside Blue Heron. Grant crossed the room greeting investors by name, relaxed enough to place one hand on the back of Lauren's chair before taking the stage. He had revised the language exactly as Nia expected. No claim of title, no mention of ownership, only phrases designed to create the same conclusion without stating it directly. "Mercer Resorts has secured long-term management control of Blue Heron," he said. "The property will anchor our new lakefront division and establish the design standard for future developments." A slide appeared showing 3 proposed resorts connected by the Blue Heron name. "Our access is established, our branding rights are confirmed, and our flagship location is ready for private investor tours." Nia watched a man at the front table underline the word confirmed. Another turned the brochure toward his attorney. Grant continued without hesitation. "The Bennett family structure retains technical title, but Mercer Resorts controls the commercial vision." The distinction sounded sophisticated enough to hide its emptiness. Lauren joined him under the lights. Her title appeared beneath her photograph: President, Mercer Lake Collection. "Blue Heron is not simply a house," she said. "It is the beginning of a hospitality identity we have already secured." She directed the audience to the financing summary that treated the property as the central asset supporting the division's valuation. Then the moderator placed 2 certification forms on the podium. Because Blue Heron Lake LLC had requested an authority verification before commitments were accepted, the venue required Grant and Lauren to reconfirm their statements for the event record. Lauren read hers quickly and signed. It certified that her title, the marketing rights, and the claimed management authority were accurate to the best of her knowledge. Grant signed a separate authority statement declaring Mercer Resorts had the legal right to promote Blue Heron, arrange tours, negotiate commercial use, and present the property as the division's flagship. He did not look toward the back of the room. This formality should reassure everyone, he said. No competing claim affects our launch. Nia felt Miriam's hand rest briefly beside the folder, not touching her, only marking the moment. They had given Grant every opportunity to step back. Instead, he had converted assumption into representation, then representation into a signed record. The moderator opened the floor for final questions. An investor asked when tours would begin. Lauren answered, next month. Another asked who could terminate Mercer Resorts access. Grant smiled. The family trust has supported our use for years. There is no realistic interruption risk. Only then did Miriam rise. She walked toward the stage carrying the same materials already established in the blue folder. The certified county deed naming Blue Heron Lake LLC. The LLC ownership record showing the Bennett Family Property Trust held 100% of the membership interest, the trustee certification naming Nia as sole acting trustee, and Grant's signed property use acknowledgement limiting his access. The moderator received the packet and conferred quietly with the venue's counsel. Grant finally saw Nia in the rear row. His hand left the podium. Lauren turned toward him, but he did not answer whatever she whispered. The main screen went dark, then returned with a single line, ownership and authority verification. The moderator faced the audience. Before any investment commitment proceeds, the titled owner's authorized representative must correct the record. He looked directly toward Nia. Ms. Bennett Mercer, as sole acting trustee controlling Blue Heron Lake LLC. Would you please come forward? Nia did not step forward to claim Blue Heron. She stepped forward so the documents could state, in public, what Grant had spent years pretending was negotiable. She crossed the yacht club floor with the blue leather folder held against her side, her black suit catching the warm chandelier light as the audience turned from the screen to the woman Grant had described as an emotional obstacle. Miriam Brooks remained near the stage, arranging the records beneath the document camera. Grant moved away from the podium and reached for the authority statement he had just signed, but the moderator placed a hand over it. That form is now part of the event record, he said. Lauren opened the presentation laptop and began closing windows with quick, uneven movements. The venue technician disabled the controls before she could remove the slides. The file has been preserved, he told her. Nia stopped beside Miriam. She did not look at the investors first. She looked at the enlarged image of Blue Heron filling the screen, the house where her grandmother had taught her to sand old wood with the grain instead of against it. Then Miriam placed the certified county deed beneath the camera. The screen changed. Blue Heron Lake LLC appeared as the titled owner of the property, followed by the legal description and Walworth County recording information. The deed does not name Mercer Resorts, Miriam said. It does not name Grant Mercer. It names Blue Heron Lake LLC. She replaced it with the LLC ownership record. Bennett Family Property Trust owns 100% of the LLC membership interest. A murmur moved through the front tables as investors compared the document to the financing summary in their folders. Miriam then displayed the trustee certification, already identified in the materials provided before the event. It named Nia Bennett Mercer as sole acting trustee, authorized to control the LLC, approve commercial use, revoke guest access, and execute decisions consistent with the trust's purpose. Grant stepped toward the microphone. A trustee is not the same as an individual owner. Correct, Nia said calmly. The trust owns the LLC. The LLC owns the house. I control the trust's decisions as sole acting trustee. You control none of them. Grant reached for his phone and called Mercer Resorts' legal department. He turned away from the microphone, but the room still heard enough. Tell them we have management rights, he said. After a pause, he looked toward Lauren. They're reviewing it. Lauren pulled the glossy brochure from the podium and began removing copies from the nearest table. One investor held his in place. You distributed this as part of the offering, he said. It stays with the record. Miriam displayed the property use acknowledgement Grant had signed 6 years earlier. His initials appeared beside the language stating that access was personal, non-transferable, and created no ownership, management authority, branding right, or power to offer tours. The final page authorized immediate revocation after unauthorized commercial use or transfer of access. You signed this, Miriam said. Grant stared at the signature, then at Nia. You let me use the property for years. For approved events, Nia replied. Permission was never a transfer. Lauren stopped gathering brochures. Grant told me the trust would formalize the arrangement after launch. Nia looked at her without triumph. He could not promise what he had no authority to grant. The moderator announced that no investment commitments would be accepted until council completed review. On the screen, the Mercer Lake Collection title disappeared from Blue Heron's image. Moments later, Mercer Resorts' legal department sent written notice to the venue suspending the presentation, withdrawing the claimed management authority, and instructing Grant and Lauren to cease representing Blue Heron as a company-controlled asset. Miriam then read Nia's formal trustee directive into the record. All Mercer Resorts access, marketing permission, tour rights, and representative authority relating to Blue Heron Lake LLC were revoked effective immediately. Grant's first public loss was not the house he had never owned. It was the right to use. Her silence is proof that he did. The board did not meet to decide whether Grant had been cruel. It met to decide how much damage his false promises had already done. By 8 the next morning, Mercer Resorts and Development had convened an emergency review from its Chicago headquarters, with Grant seated at one end of the conference table and Lauren 3 chairs away. The independent directors appeared by secure video, joined by company counsel and the finance committee. Nia attended remotely from Blue Heron with Miriam Brooks beside her, the same blue leather folder closed on the table. No one introduced her as Grant's wife. She was identified only as sole acting trustee for Bennett Family Property Trust and the authorized representative of Blue Heron Lake LLC. Council began with records already preserved: the unsigned commercial use waiver, the brochures offering private tours, the financing summary presenting Blue Heron as the secured flagship asset, Grant's signed authority statement from the yacht club, Lauren's speaker certification, and the property use acknowledgement Grant had signed 6 years earlier. The board chair asked Grant one question. Did you have written permission to market Blue Heron as controlled by Mercer Resorts? Grant leaned forward. We had a long history of access and a reasonable expectation of approval. That is not what I asked. Grant looked toward the screen showing Nia. The trust had never objected before. Miriam answered before Nia needed to. Approved events are not standing commercial authority. Mr. Mercer's own acknowledgement says so. Lauren opened the Mercer Lake Collection presentation on her tablet and scrolled to the page naming her division president. Grant told me the title was board-approved pending launch. The corporate secretary checked the minutes. No such division was ever approved. Lauren stopped scrolling. Then why was compensation discussed? Grant turned toward her. Because once the launch succeeded, approval would have followed. You said Blue Heron was secured. Commercially, it should have been. Should have been. Her voice lost its polished restraint. You built my role around a house you could not even enter. The board chair redirected the meeting. Mercer Resorts held no ownership, leasehold, management agreement, or enforceable commercial license involving Blue Heron. Because Grant controlled 52% of the voting stock, the board could not simply erase his ownership or seize his company. It could, however, act under existing corporate governance to protect the corporation from unauthorized representations. The directors suspended the Mercer Lake Collection project, withdrew every investor solicitation connected to Blue Heron, and froze new spending under the division's budget code. Grant retained his shares, but his authority to negotiate, advertise, or speak for the lakefront expansion was suspended pending completion of the review. Lauren was removed from the unapproved division title and returned to her underlying brand role while council assessed her signed certification. The financing commitments were canceled before funds changed hands. Vendors were told to stop work, but not to destroy materials or absorb approved expenses. Then the finance committee displayed a list of outstanding obligations: deposits for catering, printing, staging, photography, transportation, and temporary event staff. One director proposed disputing every charge connected to the failed launch. Grant agreed immediately. The project was never authorized. We should unwind all of it. Nia looked at the names beneath the invoices. Local workers had printed the brochures, installed lighting, prepared food, and staffed the yacht club based on purchase orders issued by Mercer Resorts. They had not written Grant's claims or Lauren's title. Blue Heron Lake LLC will not pay those bills, Nia said. But Mercer Resorts should honor valid work its employees ordered. Grant stared at the screen. That money supports a launch you just killed. No, it pays people who completed work before they knew your authority was false. Lauren lowered her tablet. For the first time, the future Grant had promised her looked exactly as it was. A title without approval, a division without assets, and a flagship controlled by the woman he had tried to remove. The board voted to protect employee wages, pay verified vendor invoices, and cancel only future commitments. Nia could have demanded the company absorb every loss immediately. Instead, she chose to stop the deception without making innocent people finance its consequences. Nia did not rebuild Blue Heron as a monument to what Grant had done. She rebuilt its purpose so no one else would be erased inside it. For weeks after the yacht club presentation, the lake house stood quiet beneath the first thin frost of November. The Mercer Resorts banners were gone. The brochures had been removed from every vendor file. The unauthorized tour calendar was canceled, and the last of Lauren's staging materials had been collected during a supervised access period. Nia remained at the oak table with Miriam Brooks while the trust's property records, maintenance budget, and event policies lay open between them. The changes were not dramatic. They were procedural, written carefully enough to outlast anger. As sole acting trustee, Nia signed a directive ending all commercial access previously extended to Mercer Resorts. Blue Heron Lake LLC retained ownership of the house, and future events would require written approval, proof of insurance, and a purpose consistent with the trust's preservation obligations. Guest codes would expire automatically after each visit. No user could create a secondary credential. The brass backup keys would remain with the property manager and trustee council, not with family guests or business partners. Miriam read each section aloud before Nia signed. "This protects the house," she said. "Now decide what you want the house to protect." Nia looked through the windows at the water moving beyond the bare trees. For years, Blue Heron had been used to make Grant's ambition look inevitable. She wanted its next chapter to belong to people who understood what it meant to begin again without an audience. Using the property's existing event revenue and maintenance budget, she created a limited residency schedule for women and families rebuilding after divorce, bereavement, or sudden displacement. The program would not transfer ownership, create a new fund, or turn the house into a public shelter. It would offer short, pre-approved stays between scheduled preservation events, with costs covered through income the LLC already earned. The trust documentation remained unchanged. Only the permitted use evolved. Miriam prepared the operating policy, and Nia approved it after confirming that restoration work, taxes, and staff wages would remain fully funded. Grant's consequences continued without spectacle. Mercer Resorts paid the vendors and temporary workers whose services had been properly ordered. The Mercer Lake Collection was formally dissolved before it ever became an operating division. Grant retained his 52% voting stake in the company, but the board required independent approval for future property claims, investor materials, and branded partnerships during the corporate review period. He was not stripped of what he legally owned. He was prevented from promising what he did not. Lauren returned briefly to her former brand position, but the signed speaker certification and her role in distributing the unauthorized materials damaged the trust required for that work. She resigned before the review concluded. No public campaign followed her. No one needed to invent a punishment larger than the reputation she had chosen to place behind Grant's claims. The divorce moved into private mediation in Illinois. Grant's attorney did not challenge Blue Heron's recorded ownership chain. The house had entered the trust before the marriage, remained titled to the LLC, and had been maintained separately. Their shared personal property was divided through negotiation, and Grant received scheduled access to collect the remaining items stored at the lake house. Nia did not attend those visits. She asked the property manager to document what left and what remained. By early spring, the first residency weekend began. A mother and teenage daughter arrived with 2 suitcases and stood uncertainly beneath the carved blue heron above the door. Nia welcomed them herself, then showed them the kitchen, the reading room, and the path to the dock. She did not tell them what Grant had said in that same entry hall. The house no longer needed the story to explain its value. That evening, after the guests settled upstairs, Nia found the old brass key in the blue leather folder. She held it in her palm, feeling the worn edges and the weight of everything it had once seemed to represent. The lock had already changed. The question now was whether she still needed to keep the key. 10 months after Grant told her she was no longer his wife, Nia stood at the same front door and watched Blue Heron welcome people who had nowhere else to begin. Summer had returned to Lake Geneva, softening the shoreline with green leaves and warm light. The house no longer carried Mercer Resorts brochures, branded linens, or presentation boards. The oak table held bowls of peaches, wildflowers from the roadside, and a handwritten schedule for the residency guests arriving that afternoon. Since spring, Blue Heron had hosted women and families rebuilding after divorce, loss, and sudden displacement. The stays remained limited, carefully scheduled around preservation work and funded through the property's existing event income. Local staff kept their jobs. The house remained protected. For the first time in years, its usefulness did not depend on making a powerful man appear more successful than he was. Nia stood near the entry table in a linen blouse and dark trousers, turning the old brass Heron key between her fingers. It no longer opened the front door. The replacement locks had been in place for months, and every guest received a temporary code that expired at checkout. Still, she had kept the key inside the blue leather folder, as though metal could hold the shape of a marriage after the marriage itself was gone. A car stopped beneath the porte-cochere. Grant stepped out alone. He wore no company badge, carried no presentation case, and did not walk toward the door until Nia opened it. Mercer Resorts had survived the canceled lakefront expansion, though the board review had left tighter controls around property claims and investor materials. Grant still owned his shares and still ran the company, but he no longer described Blue Heron in interviews or used its image in brand history. Lauren had left the company months earlier. Nia knew little about where she had gone and felt no need to ask. "I came for the last box," Grant said. The property manager had placed it beside the entry bench, 2 framed photographs, a winter coat, and several books he had left in the upstairs study. Nothing more. Grant looked past Nia toward the dining room, where volunteers were preparing welcome folders. "The program is doing well. It is doing what it was created to do." He nodded, then noticed the key in her hand. "You kept that." "For longer than I needed to." Outside, a family arrived carrying 3 suitcases and a sleeping child. Nia stepped aside so the staff could greet them. The mother paused beneath the carved heron above the door, her expression uncertain until Nia smiled and told her the room overlooking the garden was ready. Grant watched the exchange in silence. "I really didn't know the house was yours," he said when the family moved inside. Nia studied him. 10 months earlier, she might have opened the folder, shown him the deed, traced the ownership chain, and forced him to admit where he had stopped reading. None of that mattered now. "You knew it wasn't yours," she said. Grant looked down at the box by his feet. He did not apologize again. He picked it up and walked toward the car without asking whether he could return. Nia waited until the driveway was empty, then carried the brass key to the small study off the hall. She placed it inside a shadow box beneath a simple card bearing the date the locks had changed. No explanation. No name. When she returned outside, the afternoon sun had turned the lake bright enough to hurt her eyes. Voices drifted from the dock, where 2 children were laughing as they tried to skip stones. Nia closed the front door gently behind her, not to keep anyone out, but because the house was finally safe enough to open for the right people. Grant had said she was no longer his wife and expected Blue Heron to become his future. Instead, she locked him out of the lake house he had never known was hers, then opened it to a life he could no longer define.